Good morning from Panhandle Outdoors, America's only daily outdoor TV show. Your source for fishing, hunting, and information for folks who enjoy the great outdoors. Now sit back, relax. It's Panhandle Outdoors.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to Panhandle Outdoors. I'm Winston Chester. I'm glad you're here this morning. I've got a great show lined up, a couple of special guests here in the studio. But first, let's take a look at our weather brought to us by Gulf Coast Air Conditioning, Drew Pollard and his hard-working crew. Speaking of nice weather, 73 will be a high today and 62 will be low. Not a bad day. We do have that rain coming in probably tomorrow. We've got some cool weather for the weekend. But right now, the water temperature in the pier, I had to double check this. We've got it right at 65, right, almost 66 degrees, 65.8, 66 degrees at the end of the pier, which is rare in January. And that's, we had the pompano catches the other day, and that was part of that warm current that came through. Let's move on to our river readings. Take a look at the Apalachicola of Brunstown. This morning is reading a 13.1, and it is actually staying level. It's going to keep it up there. The gates are pretty steady in Chattahoochee. Now take a look at the look at the Choctawhatchee at Caryville. It's at a 7.2 and dropping out a little bit, and it's going to change. I'll give you a better reading Friday morning as what to expect for the weekend. Our tide chart brought to us by Kent Forest Lawn. Getting into those neap tides now. Decent tide today, but neap tide for the rest of the weekend. Low this morning at 9:15 and high this afternoon at 11:56. And our wind will be coming in out of the south, not too strong. I say not too strong. It's going to start off slow and then build up to about 11. I'll take a break. We'll come back with our guest. Okay, welcome back, folks. And our guest this morning from the Fish and Wildlife Commission. Behind the beard over here, y'all will recognize him. That's Travis. Welcome back.
Good morning.
Glad to have you back. He's been under the weather a little bit, and he's glad to have you back. Now, who'd you bring with you?
Arlo Kane.
Morning.
Arlo's been on the show before, and he just has vast knowledge of so many things in the outdoors, and we appreciate you coming on again. And how many years you have with it?
Almost 35.
Almost 35. And we got so much to talk about. What's going on?
Well, a lot of things. But I know y'all know Arlo. He's just a wealth of knowledge. He's the regional public or private lands biologist, and anything to do with really wildlife here in Northwest Florida, he knows it. And he's got some really interesting stuff to talk about. We're going to touch on CWD, but Arlo, what do you want to share with us this morning?
Yeah, we'll start. This weekend I was walking through several stores and looking at the bags of deer corn, and it got me to thinking. So anything that's sold as deer corn probably has a large amount or a fair amount of aflatoxin in it, which is a fungus, mold. They can't sell it as cattle feed after 20 parts per billion, so they sell it as deer corn. No big deal for deer. Deer can handle about 800 parts per billion. The problem comes in with turkeys. Turkeys are very susceptible to aflatoxin poisoning. They can handle about 100 parts per billion. Wow. So what I recommend for people, if you're buying deer corn, is to get a black light and at night or something, shine that on your corn. If it's got aflatoxin, it'll glow. And so if you have a lot of that glowing, you probably want to find another source of corn, but I would check it, because it can harm the reproduction on your turkeys. If it gets high enough, it can kill them outright, but generally it hurts the reproduction.
Wow, who knew?
Doesn't have any problem with deer usually. Yeah. They can handle quite a bit of it. So for deer corn, if deer's your only interest, it's not a big deal, but for turkeys it is.
That's interesting.
So that's something you want to be careful of.
Be aware of that. Okay, what else we got? We got so much to talk about.
Oh yeah, CWD. So let's talk a little bit about chronic wasting disease. This is a disease that's been around for a long time. It actually was first found in 1967 in Colorado. Most people don't know it's been around that long, but it has been around since at least 67, probably earlier than that. That's just when it was first found, and they didn't figure out what was causing it till about 1978. So it took a long time just to figure out what's causing it.
Wow.
And it's a prion. It's a misfolded protein. It's not a virus. It's not a bacteria. It's a misfolded protein.
Okay.
And so what it does, it bumps into other proteins of the same type and causes them to misshape. It creates a beta amyloid plaque. Holes in the brain. It's called a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. So turns your brain into sponge.
It just goes, yeah, we've
Yeah.
seen the pictures of that and all
Yes.
that. And they always around water, get real thirsty, or what's the deal with
With
that?
EHD, they usually do. With chronic wasting Ds, they may or may not go to water, but what you will see is drooling, walking in circles, listless. They'll be wasting, so they'll be really thin and just uncoordinated. Their legs may splay out.
Yeah.
All kinds of symptoms. The good news is we have not found it in Florida yet.
Right.
Okay, so Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, only states in the southeast who haven't found it.
Wow.
Kentucky doesn't have it, and Indiana doesn't have it. The other states up there do.
So Alabama does have it?
Alabama does have it. They were the latest one last year. They got a case in northern Alabama. So that's the first time it's gotten that close. Mississippi has it. And we're monitoring it. We don't want it, but we're looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
You know, so we're asking people if you're interested, contact our CWD hotline, and you know what we need is the head and about 6 or 7 inches of neck, so that we can get to the brain parts and the stuff that we need to actually find this prion protein. But yeah, it's a lethal disease. Once they get it, they're dead.
Yeah.
And it spreads by saliva, spreads by urine, feces. It gets into the environment. It can be in the soil. Experimentally, it's gotten into plants. We haven't seen that in the wild, but experimentally, this protein, you know, a mammalian protein, getting into a plant, and then they could eat it. So it's pretty wild at how it can be transmitted. And you can imagine if it gets in the soil, they've taken elk in a pen, pulled them out after they had CWD, left it for a year, and put clean elk in, and they got sick. So it persists in the environment for a long time. You can't cook it out. You can't freeze it. It takes a lot of bleach to kill it. It's not a normal protein. So it's not something we want in the state, and we're monitoring. We monitor, sample about 2,000 deer a year, and we're always looking for more deer, as many as we can get from different counties, so we can find it early and stop it from spreading.
Wow,
So
that's why
kind
we're
of
so
the goal.
strict about bringing in deer.
Absolutely.
Right, and I know we talked about that before. You know, it's frustrating for some hunters, especially the ones, you know, they're going right up to Alabama and Georgia. They want to bring their whole deer back, and we're able to do that for years, but it's just not worth the risk of possibly contaminating our herd. You know?
Wow.
So,
Okay, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Here with our FWC contacts. We always appreciate them coming on. They have such vast knowledge to share. Although you were talking about on the screen here, you're talking about CWD. Here's the hotline right here. Tell us about this. Call this number.
Yeah, so if you want to have your deer tested to find out whether it might be infected, you can call this number. Or if you see a deer acting strange, that's walking in circles, drooling, listless, you can call this number and we can get somebody out there to harvest that deer and get it tested.
Okay.
A lot of times we'll test the entire deer if it's that sick.
Okay, that's good. That's something we all have to stay on top of as outdoorsmen, and all of us do. So, and I know y'all do a good job. I've talked to some of y'all about this, and our hunters are serious. The ones I know, they're serious about keeping it out.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to like nutrition and food plots, and on the good side of.
Yeah. So you know, part of my job is meeting with landowners and talking to them about their management for deer, and a lot of that centers around food plots. And so you really have to understand what you're doing. Why are you doing it? If you have small food plots, let's say quarter acre, half acre, then what you're really doing is you're attracting deer in. But if you want to affect the nutrition of deer, antlers and fawns, they require high protein feed in the summertime. So you're looking at large food plots, 4 or 5 acres, with a high protein forage like lab, soybeans, cowpeas, any of the legumes, beans and peas. That's what it's going to take to produce bigger deer. And you need about 5% of your habitat in that.
Okay.
So if you had 800 acres, 1% would be 8 acres.
Okay.
You know, so you're talking 16 acres at least, if not more, up to 80 acres. And I've tried, and it's hard to get 80 acres on 800 food plots. It's almost impossible. But if you're doing small plots, quarter acre, things like that, then things like clover work really great because they can't wipe them out. You know, you take a quarter acre plot, put soybeans in it, they're gone in the first night. They're going to pull them right out of the ground.
Yeah.
But clover, you plant that in the fall, in the spring, and if you plant crimson clover, it'll last till about May. So It's good for getting deer through the rut, but not really for antler production so much, other than it gets them in good shape. And then white clovers will last all the way through summer. And so those, as they graze them down, they grow back. They're indeterminate growth. So if you have small plots, I recommend a little bit of wheat and rye to hold the earth together, and then focus on the clovers as being your main thing you want to put in your plot.
And that's good, and especially if you have small, like a 40 acres, but you have neighbors that want to do the same thing. If you get a group of, a lot of people in the area doing the same thing.
Exactly. So when you start talking about things like harvest regulations and you know, minimum antler sizes and things like that, you need about 2,000 acres to really be insulated from anybody around you. So if you can join with neighbors and all be on the same page, you can get that acreage if you have smaller acreage.
And you see some of that? I'm sure you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see people doing that all the time, and it works.
That's really cool.
But you got to have some acreage to really do that.
I know you've studied deer your whole life and all. What about you recommend waiting 3 years to harvest, and what's your thinking on all that?
Yeah, so generally deer don't reach maturity until they're 3 years old. So the first time you can see what antler characteristics are really going to have or what potential they have is 3 years. Most deer are killed at 1.5 years or 2.5, and you never see their potential. They don't reach their full potential till about 6.5. And we have very few deer that live to 6.5. So we're not really seeing what Florida can produce. You know, it's 3.5 is your minimum for just kind of getting an idea of what this animal's going to turn into.
That's interesting. I don't know they're harvested on average about 1.5 years.
Yeah. I've been to many clubs over the years where you'll see 3 points and spikes on the wall, and they say we just can't kill a big deer, and you know, they've just wiped out an age class, and that's why. And because you've got to get those deer up to 3.5 before you start getting good quality.
And when you want to take out one that's deformed or something, do you want to go and how can you
Usually
tell?
I don't recommend culling too much other than conformation. So one of the things is if they don't have brow tines. Okay, brow tines is a genetic trait. If you don't have brow tines, you're never going to have brow tines. That's a deer to take out. But a 3-point or a 5-point, that's a young deer. That's not worth taking out. It's got to be something you don't like, that you don't want in the population. So,
I know we still see, my wife was going to Tallahassee yesterday to see some friends, but she was talking about the number of deer on Highway 20 has been run over. Yeah, I know you see it too.
Oh yeah.
I know there's no solution to that, but are they moving around more?
Usually it starts about October. About October is when it starts, and they start coming out to the sides of the road. Some of that is because there's a lot of green stuff growing on the side of the road. Some of it's people in the woods more than there has been in the past, and deer pushing out. But yeah, starting about October, you'll start to see that increase along the sides of the road, and more hit on the side of the road too.
If you wanted to plant trees on your property, you know, for mass, what would you recommend?
Chestnuts.
Chestnuts.
I recommend chestnuts. Chestnuts grow fairly fast, so in 4 to 7 years you have nuts. They love them, and so it's a native tree. Although most people are using Chinese chestnut, which has brought the blight in, but there now are Dunstan chestnuts, which are hybrids with the American chestnut, which was wiped out in the 30s. There just wasn't any left. I mean, they barely found a few trees left in the whole U.S. But they've bred them back, and they've got some more American versions of it now. But even the Chinese works fine. But yeah, 4 to 7 years, they're producing nuts, and deer absolutely will paw them open to get at them. So I recommend that. Yeah.
So can you get those locally, you think, or do you have?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
You can. There is a nursery down in Gainesville, a big nursery that grows them. But yeah, they're around. Most native oaks take about 25 years to produce an acorn. So chestnuts work great. Sawtooth oaks can become invasive. You got to be careful with them, but they produce in 4 to 7 years. They're an exotic oak. A lot of people use those, but they will spread, so you got to be careful with that. But chestnuts are ones we've got a lot of video of deer around chestnut trees, and they'll knock them off with their antlers and velvet and everything else they can get to them. They love them.
That's interesting, very interesting. See what you learn here on Panhandle Outdoors. This comes from an expert now. It's not someone like Travis and I just get out every now and then. But this guy spent his whole life doing this. And you went to college where?
Undergraduate was Oregon State University, and then I went to Texas A&M Kingsville for my master's.
Texas A&M put out a lot of pretty good outdoors people. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's take a quick look at our fishing game times today, brought to us by Blue Water Outriggers down in Fort St. Joe. We're looking at our time 2:10 to 4:10 this morning and 2:30 to 4:30 this afternoon. Just a quick question, because we're about to get a case of the month. Deer do move around at certain times. Have you found that over the years in all your experience? Or
Sure.
feeding times and all?
Yeah,
Yes,
they feed about every 8 hours.
Every 8 hours.
Yeah. So when people talk about moon phase and all that affecting deer, it can definitely mess it up.
Yeah.
But about every 8 hours, they're going to eat.
Okay, there you go. Heard from the expert. Love doing case of the month, Travis, and
Sure.
it's just I love seeing y'all bust these bad guys. And it's been pretty rough lately on these night hunters.
They have been busy, and our guys have been out there working some late hours, making some great cases. And one in particular, we've got a lot of people making a lot of night hunt cases, but one in particular up here in Jackson County, just want to recognize Officer Jared Carr. And he did a great job up here. I won't get into the finer details, but as you can see, not a lot of times we recover the deer and the gun, and that's what he had there. It's a pretty nice buck. You can see the device the guy had there on top of the scope to help him shoot it at night. But a lot of times, people are shooting these deer. They're shooting them at distance. Sometimes they miss. Sometimes they wound the animal. We can't find them. And I've told you before, they'll throw the guns on us and all stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But great job by Jared here. He was able to get, like I say, the gun and the deer and catch
Great.
the guy red-handed. So up in Jackson County, great job, Jared. And all our guys, they're out there late at night into the early morning hours.
Yeah.
The cold weather we've had, so a lot of dedication and commitment to make these cases.
Yeah,
so.
they got all the night vision and all, so it's tougher and tougher. But
Oh, yeah.
Next time we come, we'll talk more about that. But right now, we're gonna get back. Thank you for doing that one, and
Yes, sir.
great job, officer. Okay, let's get back to what are we gonna ask him about?
You want to talk about?
We're going to circle back to EHD.
EHD,
Okay.
So
yeah.
epizootic hemorrhagic disease or blue tongue virus. I know people have heard a lot about that. It's totally a different type of disease than CWD. It's caused by a midge, a little biting fly. So it's not population related. If they get into wet areas where there's a lot of these flies, they can get bit in the skin and get the EHD. It can be an acute case that kills them, or it can be a chronic case and they'll have sloughing hoofs and blue tongues and they'll live with it for quite a while. But back in 2012, we had a severe outbreak all across the U.S. and most people remember populations declined. People in high fences were finding 70, 80 deer dead. They will go to water, usually in late summer. They're going to head down to water. So if you're out on your lease in August or whatnot, walk along the creeks, and if you start finding skulls and antlers and all that, you may have had an EHD outbreak. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a natural disease. There's no action you can take, but just be aware that they will have similar symptoms, but mostly they just go to water and they die near water. So that's going to be the telltale sign is they're next to water for the most part.
And like you said, there's nothing we can do about it.
There's nothing we can do about it. It's a
occurrence.
natural occurrence. Sure. There's no vaccines. There's no treatments. And there isn't for just about anything in deer biology. There's nothing out there that really we can treat a population on.
Yep.
Okay.
So it just happens.
What about the classes you teach?
Yeah, so I'm a certified Boone and Crockett scorer, and so we have been putting on classes for the officers to get more of them certified, so we have more people out there across the Panhandle that can score your deer, especially in the Western Panhandle. We didn't have a whole lot of scores through the Central and Western Panhandle, so now we've got quite a few, about probably 25 officers that are trained up, plus some of my guys. And so they can score for Florida Buck Registry. They're not Boone and Crockett certified. They're for the Florida Buck Registry. And the Florida Buck Registry has a minimum score of 100 for typical and 125 for non-typical. If you think your deer is big enough, get a hold of us. You can go on our website and you can go to the Florida Buck Registry and you'll find a link there to find a score. And we'll score your deer. You bring it in. It can be fresh.
Okay.
We don't have a drying period like Boone and Crockett. There's no 60-day drying period. There's no fee, and it's just recognizing people who have killed a nice buck in Florida. Florida deer don't reach Boone and Crockett size. There's only about less than 5 deer that have ever scored Boone and Crockett in Florida.
Okay.
Those are back in the 1970s and
Yeah.
50s and stuff like that. So we really don't have those deer that meet that. So we created the Florida Buck Registry to be able to get.
How many do we get in this Panhandle area? How many do we get to qualify?
Actually, a fair amount. I've got stacks of them over the years. So I probably score 30 myself.
Oh, wow.
A year, and just in the Bay County area.
Very good.
And then there's people doing it all across the state, so it's quite a large number. They're in the thousands.
That's interesting. Okay, what else do we need to cover? We got about a couple minutes left.
We can cover some stuff, and yeah, like Arlo was saying, he just actually certified myself and some other officers, and super interesting class. And it's funny though, if you know anything about deer scoring, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, that's a good buck. He's over 100 inches. Well. With deductions and different things like that, because it's over 100 net, not gross, and it gives you a better appreciation for a big buck when you know how to properly score them and all that stuff. But yeah, I just want to mention a couple things real quick. I know we got, next month we got the closure for spotted sea trout. We've now got 5 trout regions throughout the state, and the Western Panhandle will be closed in the month of February. And one real quick thing on duck hunting. We've had this for a couple years now, but it's actually a bag limit change mid-season with bluebills. So when this show airs, we will be at 2. But for the first half of duck season, it's 1.
Okay.
So from enforcement and for the hunters, that's a little challenging, having a bag limit change mid-season. But some of the reasoning behind that, and I've talked with biologists, it's, we do have greater numbers later in the year when the cold comes down. The big divers get on the bay, the redheads and bluebills. But I just want to remind everyone, it's 2 bluebills now. And then at the end of the year, we've actually got, our youth waterfowl days. You can go online, look at that stuff. And then we have an active military and veterans waterfowl day. So I know we got to wrap up. I just want to mention that. And I'm so glad Arlo could come on the show and share some really cool stuff with you guys.
Arlo, we appreciate you coming on. He's promised to come. Right before we came on air, we started talking about cobra grass. So he's going. That's something. The whole show we can do. Yeah. So he's going to come back on. We're going to talk about that because that's amazing about what it's doing. But we'll talk about it later. Travis, glad to have you back, and glad you're doing better. And we'll see you about a month from now. About every Wednesday, second Wednesday or something like that, we'll try to get you coming on.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you all watching Panhandle Outdoors. Do something good today for your fellow man, and God bless.
Thanks for watching America's only daily outdoor TV show, Panhandle Outdoors with Winston Chester, featuring hunting, fishing, and other activities and information to help you enjoy the great outdoors. Join us next time for Panhandle Outdoors.